Welcome to Erin Explains, the show where my friend Erin explains something to me. And today we are talking about patriotism in Canada, as it were.
If you don't know, we're both Canadians.
We are both Canadian.
Yes.
This year, 2025, kind of started off with the threat from the U.S. of making us the 51st state.
Yes, it did.
And that inspired in many Canadians a lot of patriotism. Elbows up, that sort of thing. I myself made some YouTube videos on another channel, actually a channel you might be watching this on, because we have multiple channels. We're a media empire over here. That video was about tourism, Canadian tourists not going to the US. Incredibly popular, so popular that I have recently killed the video, made it private so nobody could watch it anymore because it is throwing off the algorithm. Nobody wants to watch anything else I make. They just come to watch this stupid video. Hopefully I'm showing clips from it right now. I hate Michael J. Fox now.
You can't hate Michael J. Fox, come on.
He's just made my life a living hell this past year. I used to love him, but I don't know. But I know you've been thinking a lot about these issues, and you have an article coming out.
I do. I have an article coming out in the Walrus this week. We'll link the link when it comes out.
Possibly today, tomorrow, next day. If it's not below, come back. It'll be there as soon as it's live.
And it's about, because, I have been a longtime music journalist. And so this is about music in Canada and the 51st state rhetoric and like the impact of that. I mean, there has been a lot of sort of talk about tariffs and how Canadians have been reacting, buying Canadian, whether it's booze or produce or whatever. And
which is difficult to do when Canadian company or American companies start marking things as Canadian.
Yes, exactly. But I've heard that's happening.
Into buying it.
But I was invited to go and speak at a conference. It's a popular music conference held annually. This year it was at the University of Southern California, and I was going to be on a panel.
So you're a traitor.
Yes.
You didn't watch my video on tourism at all.
No, I went.
Okay. Maybe I'll repost it.
I went to LA, and initially, before Trump started talking about the 51st state thing, I was on a panel. It was a really fascinating group of people talking about music as an export product. Uni Hong, who has written this book, The Birth of Korean Cool, she was talking about the export of Korean music, K-pop, etc. Then there was Eric Weisbard, who has written many, many things, talking about Swedish music as an export, and the influence of Swedish music on the overall music industry, which is intense. It's a topic for another day. But and I was going to be talking about Canadian music and how Canadian music has been incredibly successful worldwide, whether it's like Celine Dion, Justin Bieber, Drake, you name it, etc.
Anne Murray.
Anne Murray, yes. However, after the discussion of the 51st state thing, my idea to just kind of go and talk about Canadian music and its success in the United States seemed kind of silly. And I rethought my whole presentation. And so I ended up really just talking about what Canadian music actually is. And if we are talking about not wanting Canada to be annexed by the United States, what does it mean to listen to so-called Canadian music? So
how is it different from American?
Yes, exactly. And what does it mean to protect Canadian culture? So I talked to a bunch of really interesting people and did a bunch of research on this Canadian protectionism, Canadian content regulations.
CanCon.
There is this thing called the Maple Rule, which is that contributes to the fact that depending on the radio station, anywhere to 10% to upwards of almost half of music that is played on Canadian radio must be Canadian according to the Maple Rule. And
which is not necessarily a Canadian artist. It can be a Canadian producer. It can be like there's a certain quota of Canadian.
It stands for music, artist, lyrics,
right,
and performance or performance location. Right. So you have to have
it's recorded, the songwriters. It's a multifaceted. It's not just the front person to the band.
Exactly. And so this is why, quite famously, Bryan Adams' "Everything I Do It For You" was not considered Canadian, right, even though Bryan Adams is famously Canadian, because he only had the artist part. That
Michael Kamen, the film composer, late great film composer, actually came up with the music.
It was Mutt Lange, Shania Twain's ex-husband, who wrote the music and the lyrics.
Everything I do it for you.
Everything I do it for you. This song, maybe not the score, but the song.
No, but the song. It's okay. This is now off on a tangent about fucking Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah,
a 35-year-old movie. I am positive Michael Kamen is listed. I remember the music video playing.
Maybe he was involved.
Well, because the theme, the music, the actual piece of music that is the main "Everything I Do It For You" is the love theme from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yes, it
from
is.
The score, which was written by Michael Kamen.
But it was Mutt Lange that made it into a pop song.
Okay, but he took Michael Kamen's piece of music.
The point is Michael Kamen Canadian? Now, the thing is that the people that I talked to had different thoughts about this. I spoke to Andrea Warner, a wonderful music writer who's written all sorts of books. Please check the links below. You can see the many different things that she has done. And, she talked about how this is really sort of like an industry approach. And when we think about what it means to listen to Canadian music, like just kind of continuing with the stuff that is popular means that we're really sort of still focused on some kind of colonial identity as to what being Canadian means. Right. And we need to really think about, when we're talking about artistic creation, like how are we framing a Canadian identity? Right. I spoke to Alan Greyeyes, who is, as he calls it, he's a helper in the music industry. He works with Indigenous music, runs an amazing festival. Again, check link below. And one of the things that he said quite interestingly is, if genres like pop music, all kinds of pop music, hip hop music, rock and roll, if those even disappeared in Canada, they'd still exist somewhere else in the world. Right.
Well, that's something I was just thinking when you're talking about the colonial, you're redoing this thing. You have this influence from the U.S., from Britain, pop, music, central.
Exactly.
If we're just focusing on that music, aren't we just kind of trying to catch up and keep up with the Joneses, as it were?
Exactly. And the point that he made to me, he said that there are Indigenous genres that literally only exist in Canada. Right. Different types of music. Right. And I mean, this is just in music, but beyond that, that only exist in Canada. And so this idea of so-called Canadian content, it's not really allowing those very specific to this piece of land that we happen to call Canada right now, that wasn't always called that is, it's not showcasing that music. Right. And then if you also, I spoke to Del Cowie, who is a writer who writes a lot about hip hop in Toronto and the history of hip hop in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And he spoke to me about how, marginalized communities, Black music in general in Canada has been so pushed aside. If you want to follow the story of how there was not a so-called urban music station in Toronto for many, many, many years, and there were increasing numbers of country music stations and pop music stations and talk radio, etc., before there ever was a
90s in Southern Ontario.
Yes, where we were all listening to, shout out to WBLK. Everyone's favorite radio station across the border, with all the R&B and hip hop that we were not getting from anything in Toronto. Yeah. And so that also, we need to think about how this idea of like elbows up, let's celebrate Canadian music.
But what Canada?
Right. You know, when Dan Aykroyd was on Saturday Night Live in the 90s to present the Canadian band, the Tragically Hip.
Right.
I mean, the Tragically Hip reflects a very particular Canada.
Yes, it does.
A very white Canada. Yeah. And even though I think it could be argued that they tried to speak about different elements of Canadian history and culture.
Yeah.
They tried, but they still were a
but it's
white
from the perspective of
band. Yeah, exactly.
White guys from Kingston.
Exactly. And so in terms of like, well, what do you do to support like Canadian music in the face of this kind of rhetoric and this encroaching threat of annexation? You really have to make sure that you're not jingoistically just celebrating, you know, the typical sort of image of Canada as being this white country.
Right. So then where would Francophone music fall into this? Since we both live in Quebec,
yes,
I'm wondering where that falls into this all.
Well, and that's another issue. I mean, whereas Canada has maple rules, Quebec has also engaged in attempts to really encourage Francophone music.
Right.
But again, running into similar issues in terms of what constitutes Québécois music.
Right.
You know, like, is Québécois music only in French?
Right.
I mean, there are groups, and a good example is there's a hip hop act called À la Claire Ensemble, who in each of their songs, they provide the lyrics and then the percentage of that's in English and in French in order to be able to assure that, you know, even though they might be.
There are rules in Quebec regarding signage and how much of it you can have in English, what percentage of your staff can be English only.
Yes.
All meant to protect the French
language. And
sometimes it gets really, really bureaucratic.
Yes. And also it doesn't necessarily reflect the culture that exists in Quebec, a culture that is very, you know, it's not just people come in and they assimilate into Quebecois culture. You know, you have...
Canada's got this idea of being this very diverse country that exists in Quebec as well.
Exactly.
The same diversity you would find in Toronto, you find in Quebec.
And even within sort of French music that exists in Quebec, you know, you would have stuff that would be very, let's say, white.
Right.
But then there are also a range of different types and styles of Haitian music that have expressions that are very Quebec, very Montreal sometimes. Right. You have Maghrebi music from like North African music that has an expression that's very Quebec based, that comes from the experience of being here. And in the same situation that's happening in the rest of Canada in terms of certain types of music, be it Indigenous music, music from minoritized populations being sort of pushed to the side, and these kind of protectionist measures, they end up being protecting the status quo.
They favor the status quo.
Exactly. Yeah. And so really, if you're going to want to support Canadian music,
to ask, what can people do if they want to support?
And I would say that, you know, in the same way that people want to eat locally, like listen locally, listen to what bands there are in your city where you live. You know, if you're a Canadian and you live in Winnipeg, there's a big music scene there. If you live in, you know, where we're from in suburban Toronto, you know, there are bands that exist there. Listen locally. Try to support directly artists through, you know, buying merch.
Somebody's going to a live show and actually buying a CD or vinyl, whatever, or a T-shirt or whatever it is. It goes directly to them.
Exactly. And encourage the government to fund music, because that is, and culture in general. I mean, we just had the budget. It had some interesting things in terms of supporting art and culture in Canada, one of which was supporting a Canadian run for the Eurovision Song Contest. I mean, okay. But maybe instead of just renewing some subsidies for Canadian music that had been around since the sort of pandemic era, maybe making those more substantial and really engaging.
I heard they're putting together, it's going to be like a compilation of Songs of the Pipeline. Like that's one of their...
What?
I don't know. That's coming out too.
Great. Anyhow, but you know, there's a lot of great Canadian music. Full disclosure, I'm the jury foreperson of the Polaris Prize, so that means that
biased. This is all biased.
This is all biased. So I can assure you that even like from my personal perspective, that there's incredible music in Canada, incredibly varied music. Go look at the Polaris Prize shortlist for the past few years, and there's some amazing stuff there.
Starting place. You look for some new artists, Canadian artists. You don't know where to start because all you're thinking is bare naked ladies and I don't know, Carly Rae Jepsen.
Carly Rae Jepsen's great.
I got no problem with Carly Rae Jepsen. I'm just saying, like, those are names you already know because they're big pop. Sensation, and you're looking for something new. The Polaris Prize.
Links below too. There's Spotify playlists, Apple Music playlists, less evil streaming service playlists.
Right. Well, I don't want to send anybody to those things. I'm saying let's send them to the Polaris list. That's a place to start. And then maybe go out to your local, if you got a record shop, if those things exist, if you're lucky enough
independent
to have
record stores.
Exactly. Like we're lucky enough to have here in the neighborhood in Montreal. Go check it out. Go listen to new music and go see bands.
And while you're liking and subscribing below, you know, leave a comment. Tell us who you like the best.
Yeah.
A Canadian artist that you like, that you think is great, and why you think they're great, and why other people should listen to them.
Yeah.
Because
and not somebody we all know.
No,
think a little deeper. Think somebody that's a little more obscure that you don't think everybody necessarily has heard, and you want to get their name out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that explains it. So yeah, read the article. Comes out the next day or two in the Walrus. And until next time, like, subscribe, leave a comment. See you later.